It's Sunday, March 28th. I'm Mercedes Stephenson, and this is the West Block: politics, perspectives, and players. Canada, the United States, and the UK have come together to demand that China stop the alleged human rights abuses against Uyghur Muslims. Last week, for the first time, Canada targeted 4 Chinese officials with sanctions who are suspected of being involved in a years-long campaign of persecution of the Uyghurs. The Chinese embassy has fired back at Canada with a scathing response and a warning, saying those playing with fire will end up burning themselves badly. So, what is Canada's next move? Joining me now is Foreign Affairs Minister Marc Garneau. Thank you so much for joining us, Minister. Obviously a dramatic week for Canada-China relations. Are you concerned that China is going to take further action against Canada as a result of imposing these historic sanctions on them? We know just recently they struck out at the United Kingdom by reverse sanctioning 4 of their parliamentarians. Do you think you or members of your government might end up being sanctioned by China?
Well, good morning, Mercedes. We'll see what happens, but sometimes a country needs to say what needs to be said. And in this particular case, we and our allies, a group, as you point out, the EU, the United States, the UK, and Canada, is put in place sanctions because they needed to be sending a signal to the Chinese government that their gross violations of human rights in Xinjiang to the Uyghurs were totally unacceptable. So a very strong signal was sent, and of course, we'll see what happens.
Minister, there have been folks who've been calling on your government to bring in these sorts of sanctions when the US, the EU did. We were a little late to the game on this. Why was that?
We have been working with like-minded democratic countries on a coordinated response. You'll notice, for example, that on the 15th of February, Canada led an initiative called the Declaration on Arbitrary Detention and State-to-State Relations. And we assembled 58 countries for that declaration, pointing out how it was totally unacceptable for a country to arbitrarily detain the citizens of another country on trumped-up charges. The display of solidarity with 22 countries in front of the courthouse on Monday at the trial of Michael Kovrig was another demonstration of solidarity amongst countries. And of course, the countries that joined us in imposing the sanctions on China for their treatment of the Uyghurs is another example. And we're going to continue to build on that coordinated multilateral approach to China and to other countries such as Russia.
Why has your government not called what is happening to the Uyghurs a genocide, which many of your allies have?
So we're looking at that very seriously and working with our allies on that. It is a very big decision. We take all allegations of genocide very seriously. But the important point here to remember is that we have, for the first time, sent a very clear signal to China that we are deeply preoccupied by the very credible reports of gross human violations that are occurring in Xinjiang, and we're going to continue to watch this very carefully. We went to the United Nations last year, to the Human Rights Council, and said that this needed to be investigated and that China should allow an independent, impartial body to go into China to examine the situation. We've put in measures with respect to companies using forced labor, restrictions on that. We are continuing to evaluate different measures to get the message across to China that its treatment of the Uyghurs is totally unacceptable and deeply preoccupying.
Well, and you mentioned companies doing business in Xinjiang province and the concerns about the possibility of forced labor. We spoke to a member of the Uyghur community on this show a couple of weeks ago, and they were calling on the Canadian government to do more than just ask companies to police themselves, to actually take a look as a government about whether Canadian companies, and there are a significant number of them with significant investment in this region, are in fact using forced labor. Is your government willing to take a tougher stance on that and to start looking at Canadian companies that are investing there or telling them that they can't invest there?
Well, we've already taken a first step, and I think that first step sends a very clear message that it is important that no product that is the result of forced labor, specifically the Uyghurs or other ethnic minorities, find its way to Canada. And Canadian industry or Canadian companies that operate in that part of the world are fully aware of that, and our indications as we're monitoring the situation are that they are respecting those restrictions.
I think there's a lot of questions about how well countries are able to actually monitor this, because the Chinese government won't allow independent monitors in to look at this. They kick journalists out for reporting on it. But I want to change gears to talk a little bit about still the Chinese-Canada relationship, but the two Canadian citizens who have been on trial in China in recent weeks. We found out that the Canadian ambassador wasn't there for this. He's actually here in Canada, Dominic Barton. Why is he home at such a critical time for Canadians who are being arbitrarily detained and now tried?
So let me explain to your viewers, this is a very standard procedure that the government of Canada will sometimes recall its ambassadors for discussions face to face. And this is exactly what has happened in this particular case of Dominic Barton. It happened before we knew about the trials of the two Michaels last week. And it is to bring him back so that we can sit down with him and have a discussion about how we move forward with China. He is a key player in all of this. And this is totally standard procedure. It happens in the diplomatic world all the time. And of course, we're very ably represented by the chargé d'affaires, Jim Nicol, who did a great job in both Dandong and in Beijing at the trials of the two Michaels. So this is totally standard procedure.
Didn't you think maybe you should reschedule that when you found out about the trials?
We have some very serious things to discuss with the ambassador about our evolving relationship with China. I think your viewers will understand that, and it's important to have him in the same room with us so that we can have those very frank discussions and open discussions without worrying about any kind of security as the situation evolves in China. And so this is, as I say, a very important reason for him to be back in Canada. And we're very fortunate to have a person of his caliber, somebody who knows China so well and who has been representing us so well during his time as the ambassador.
I know there's been some concerns about Ambassador Barton in terms of he used to be with McKinsey. McKinsey has done business close to where some of these Uyghur forced labor camps were. McKinsey says they didn't know about them. They were in close proximity. But I do want to ask you one last question about something else you said last week. You talked about the risk to citizens who are doing business in China. You warned other countries that their citizens, too, could be picked up and randomly thrown in jail as political punishment while they're doing business in China. Should Canadians still be going to China to do business there, or should they stay home because the risk is simply too high?
Well, we have certainly drawn attention, hopefully to the world, of the risks associated with going to a country like China, which, if it doesn't get its way, can resort to arbitrary detention, as we've seen, unfortunately, in the case of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. So we need to carry that message. Let me just say that, I've known bullies in my life, and I know that bullies can change, but they don't change unless you keep telling them that they need to change because their behavior is unacceptable. That is what Canada is doing with its like-minded allies, and we will continue to do it because arbitrary detention is totally unacceptable. You cannot arrest the innocent civilians of another country simply because you're not happy with that other country. We can have differences of opinion. That's fine. We don't resolve them that way. And that's the message that we needed to carry, and we will continue to carry to China.
Does that mean Canadians shouldn't go, though, because the Canadian government can't protect them?
There are no restrictions at the moment of that nature, but I think that every individual who decides that they're going to go over to China has to make their own assessment at this point.
Minister Garneau, thank you so much for your time today, sir.
My pleasure, Mercedes.